Welcome to CareSmart's 360 On Air, a home care podcast. I'm Mike Palladino, a senior account executive here at CareSmart's 360. Equipping yourself for success in home care sales goes beyond just brochures. Your essential toolkit is really a blend of knowledge and resources. First, understanding the industry with compliance manuals and training on senior care needs. That's very important. This builds trust with potential clients. On the digital front, a user-friendly website and SEO optimization attracts online searches. Marketing software, just the same, also helps manage leads and track referrals that are coming through. Finally, reliable scheduling software ensures smooth operations, and it's really a key factor for busy families. With this toolkit, you'll be prepared to effectively connect with families and demonstrate the value your home care services bring. Today, we have on the panel Dawn Fiala, Director of Sales and Client Services at Approved Senior Network Marketing, which is an online marketing agency for home care and senior service industries. Dawn has over 15 years of experience in building high-performance teams, brands, and companies within the home care industry. Welcome to the podcast, Dawn.
Thank you, Mike. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited to have you on. And my background obviously is in sales, and it's one thing that I have, near and dear to my heart. I know the importance of that business development side, and really keen on learning more from you and sharing that knowledge with our audience here with respect to sales and selling in a very complex landscape, which is our industry. So
Yeah.
with that said, I'd love to dive into my first question for you, Dawn, which,
Okay.
what are the specific needs and challenges faced by new salespersons entering the home care industry?
So I've seen through the years, there's three types of people entering the industry. There are people that have never been in sales or in home care. You have people that have been in home care for years, but that they've never been in the sales, so they're entering a new role. And then you have people that have done sales their whole life, but they've never been in home care. And I would say for all three of those types of people, they need training. Training is going to be so important. This industry is really unique. And I'm in sales too. I've been in sales my whole life. And, of course, you have friends that are salespeople and you talk about your job and all the things. And home care is just so different than pharmaceutical, medical device. It's just a very different industry. And what's interesting about our team, we do teach home care sales training and business development. There are three of us on our team that have been, I like to call it, in the trenches of home care. That may not sound very good, but it feels that way. There are days you feel like you're in the trenches of home care. There are three of us that have been in the trenches of home care for 15 years, 15 plus years. And I'm from Arizona, one's from New York, one's from California. We have all been doing the same thing, the same way, and going to the same places all these years. And we were all very successful and got into the $1 million mark very quickly, millions of dollars, with the home care agencies we worked for. So it's just a very unique kind of sales. And so the training needs to be very specific to this industry. And they need support. They need training, they need support. And it's not like a one and done training. I've trained you, go do it, and they'll take what you've trained them and taught them to do, because I've trained lots of marketers in my time, and they go do it, but they get stuck. They get stuck. I did what you said at these 3 SNFs and it worked. And now I'm at this SNF, skilled nursing facility. And she said to me, I have 12 other home care agencies I work with. I don't need to talk to you.
Yeah.
But of course, as her manager or the owner of the company, she needs to go back. She has to go back and talk. So how does she do that? What does she do to overcome that objection standing there in front of that person, right? They need to be armed with how to overcome that objection in person, rather than hoping to get in front of them 3 weeks, 4 months from now, however long it takes, and be able to say what they need to say. So it's the training, it's the support. They need to be taught how to be effective and efficient in the field. They need to know how to qualify their referral sources so they're not wasting their time. If you go to a SNF and they're 100% Medicaid beds, probably not a great place for private pay. I mean, so should you be going back every 8 to 10 days? No, probably not. You're probably not going to get a lot of private pay business out of a SNF that's 100% Medicaid. It could happen from time to time, but it's very rare, right? That's going to happen. So they need to know how to qualify those referral sources too, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think what's exciting about what you explained at the start of the answer to your question was you get people from all backgrounds.
Mhm.
And you might have people that have sales experience, like myself, but I've never worked in home care, specifically like on the practical side. So when you talk about that touch point where, you really have to understand your audience, you have to understand their pain points, what they're going through, and ultimately what they need, right? I think
Mhm.
the idea with sales, because I like to be more philosophical on sales, is we're always trying to, make things easier, but also find solutions and value. We could really kind of talk about features or benefits and all these different things that make us great, but is there a need? And it's understanding what that need is first and foremost, and then leveraging that to show how you have helped similar agencies or facilities or whomever be more successful. And
Mhm.
it's the objection handling because I think, especially in our industry, it's a bit of a grind, right?
It
So
is a
you have to
grind.
get out there, you're in the field, you're on the road, you're driving around, going from facility to facility, and they speak to lots of different people. So how do you differentiate? How do you stand out from the crowd? Well,
Mhm.
that's really taking a deep understanding of who you're speaking to, knowing your audience, and researching them. I've
Mhm.
seen so many. I've been on sales calls when, on the leadership side, and the amount of times that we have had meetings, and this I'm talking more software, but it's still relevant, where we get on a call and they have no idea who we are, and
Yes.
right away I'm like, probably not
Mhm.
going with this one. And you give them the benefit of the doubt, you listen to
Right.
them, you hear them out, but then they do a lot of their discovery on the call when they have you, when you really should be doing it ahead of time to really
Mhm.
prepare for potential objections. Because if you're not prepared, you're going to hear a question on site or on the fly that you don't know the answer to, and that immediately casts doubt on your abilities, right? Um,
Exactly.
so I'm not going to go off on a tangent. You can probably tell that I could, but
Yes. Yeah.
I do think that objection handling is so
It's
important.
huge.
And
It
it's
is
also
very
being
big.
honest, right? If you don't know the answer to a question, or, I think if somebody asks you something or kind of positions it a way you haven't heard before, you have to just be honest about that. Say, Dawn, I haven't heard that before, but why is that so important to you? Dig
Mhm.
deeper, ask questions. And I think
Mhm.
that is such a key component to being successful in sales in general, because sales is an art form, right? Then you learn the art and apply it to your practice area.
Right, right.
But
That's very true. And I think that you touched on differentiating yourself. That is what's going to get you past the gatekeeper. That's what's going to get you a scheduled lunch and learn. They know
Mhm.
what home care is. They
Yeah,
could they don't want to hear about that. They want to hear why your company is different and how that differentiator is going to help their patients
yeah,
or their residents, if whoever you're talking to. And I've found too, and I teach this also, is that when you're in skilled nursing facility and you're referring to the people in that building, they're called patients. Even though they're our clients, they're called patients. And when you're
hmm
in assisted living, they are residents. So you need to be speaking their language, and that goes to understanding their day to day too, and being right there with them. So differentiating yourself is really going to make you stand out. And it's hard. The market is saturated. When someone
Oh
does say,
yeah,
I'm talking to 12 other companies, I don't need you. That means they see everybody as the same.
yeah,
All 12 of them are the same. And so you really need to have a differentiator that makes you stand out. So they think, oh, okay, they do a special training on Alzheimer's. This patient has Alzheimer's. I'm going to refer them here.
yeah.
So there has to be something that makes you stand out for sure.
Yeah, I think so there was a tip or like a tool I was taught many years ago by a technology sales trainer. His name is John, and I'm not going to say his last name, but he's one of the more renowned trainers out there. He trains all like the Salesforces, the LinkedIn's, all like the major tech
Okay.
companies. And
Mhm.
I was fortunate prior in a previous life to be a part of a Fortune 500 that received this sales training when I worked in the corporate world. And he basically helped us understand that it's awesome if you can figure out the objections from your learning speaking with others and get ahead of them on your outreach,
Yes.
whether it's on the phone, whether it's a
Mhm.
cold email, or whether it's in person. And starting that conversation with, we typically understand that agencies or businesses have X, Y, and Z challenges, and we typically get this type of feedback. This is how we help them differentiate or get beyond these things that they normally struggle with. And even if that's just a basic part of it, that lets them know you do know what you're talking about. You're
Yeah,
a
no, and for
consultant, and
sure.
it's a more
Mhm.
relationship approach, right? So,
That's a great approach. And I
yeah,
think too, when you're training your salesperson, giving them those possible objections, you're in a sniff and this is what they're thinking about you.
yeah,
this is what they might say to you, and you're going to need to be prepared with how you're going to respond. So that should definitely be a part of the training too. But I like that approach that you would use with them as well. I think
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah.
And I think you touched on this too, whereas you got to be continuously learning. You can't just be trained on day one and that's you're trained for life. Sales is, as mentioned, it's an art form. It changes overnight. What worked yesterday probably won't work tomorrow. And we're going through the idea now of cold outreach, the outbound approach, cold calling. I think there's definitely is still a market for that, but we also have buyers today or people that evaluate vendors or software that are just much more knowledgeable. We have more access to information. So a lot of the time, and we do this, and I'm sure you do this too, if you're looking to buy a tool or buy a system or purchase like a service, you're probably doing your own research ahead of time. You know your top 5 vendors or agencies you're going to work with, and you're going to maybe even
Yeah.
reach out to them ahead of time as an inbound, right? And
Mhm.
that is such a challenge, but I think one of the things we can do to really ensure we stay on top of that is on the objection side, learn what are the top 10 objections we saw last month, the top 5 last week, over the course of a year. What are the most frequent types of questions or concerns we're getting? You build your pitch around that, boom, you're
You're
immediately more
good.
knowledgeable and
Yeah.
you're gonna have a
Mhm.
more of a chance, not gonna win every time, but you might have a more of a chance to win, and that's all you could ask for. Set
Right.
yourself up to succeed.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Awesome. So as you can tell, it's a very exhilarating topic to me. So
Mhm.
um, segueing to the next one, Dawn, what would you say are the effective communication strategies for building trust and rapport with potential clients during the sales process? And it's funny because we were going to touch on these organically out throughout this, but I think it's a
Right.
pretty good question.
Sure. No, it is a good question. And so, prior to this, we were talking about more business development. We call it home care sales, but it is really business development. It's a different hat.
Hmm.
Sales starts when you're in that house or on the phone with an adult child or in the home doing an assessment. So, what I've seen through the years is that adult child is usually the one that's going to call in for parent services for
Yeah.
their parents. They are in crisis, and maybe they're not, but in their mind, they're in crisis. Their whole world just fell apart. Mom and dad have been in charge. Mom and dad have called the shots, and now they can't. One of them can't. Something's
Hmm.
going on that spurred this call, and they're in crisis. And so you really do need to stop everything you're doing and give them 100% focus. And there are 2 things that have to happen on that phone call. You have to place yourself as a home care expert, and you must connect with them emotionally.
Yeah.
Those 2 things have to happen, and that's a sales thing too. Home care expert, it's real easy to do that by saying things like, typically in this situation, or I find with hip replacement, this is the best way to go. Or I find when working with someone with Alzheimer's, this, or we have Alzheimer's training. When you state things in that way, they know this isn't your first rodeo. You've been
Yeah.
through this before. They desperately want to take this problem, which is what's going on with mom and dad, and hand it to someone who can take care of it for them.
Yeah.
They're out of their realm. They're a fish out of water. They have no idea what to do next. So place yourself as an expert. They always share a little bit of what's going on. My mom fell and broke her hip. She's in rehab. She's discharging in a couple weeks. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry to hear that. That can be so hard on everyone involved. And so even if you're interrupting a little bit, you're connecting emotionally with them. And you're also saying it's so hard when this happens for everyone involved. That's
Yeah.
also placing you as an expert. So connecting with them emotionally and placing yourself as an expert allows them to trust you enough to hand this over, because that's what
Yeah.
needs to happen. Yeah.
For sure, it's that consultative approach, and I think as salespeople or when you're trying to sell something, it's really easy to focus on the benefits, but a lot of the time those benefits are subjective because we know the benefits in our mind, and it's like we see this, and this. You're going to see a reduction in X or Y or Z, and that sounds cool and great on paper, but is that what is most important to them? So
Mhm.
I think that really also stems from the communication standpoint, asking lots of questions. What is most important to you? What are you most scared of?
Mhm.
How do we set you up for success? What does that look like to you? And I think if you can really dig deep and just resonate with them, understand your target, don't call it the buyer or those that are going to set the services up for their loved ones, that's really, really important. And building that
Mhm.
trust, building that, consultative approach or whatever you want to call it, that's number one, and everything else will just fall into place, right? Because the
Mhm.
features and benefits, whatever that looks like, it's going to be obvious after the fact or once they start working with them. But it's like, do they trust you? Do you know what you're talking about? Is this your first
Mhm.
rodeo or not? Right?
Right, right.
So yeah, it's such an interesting methodology, I would say, because there's also not the thing that's challenging, I think, Dawn, about sales is it's not a one size fits all approach, right?
No,
What
no.
might work, with one
Mhm.
family or one person may not have any semblance of working with the next, right? So that's where the questions come in to
Mhm.
really communicate effectively, build that trust, and let them know that you are, somebody who does a have that due care for them, but also you really want to help them. And
Mhm.
that's where that effective communication comes in, just building that trust.
Yep, yep. I think that's a very, and when they know they can trust you because you're an expert and because
Yeah.
you care, they're more willing to have that conversation and hand this over, and get that assistance. And then you usually piggyback with this adult child to convince mom and dad that this
Hmm.
is okay and that we need to do this. And that's the next thing you'll hear from the adult child is, my mom's never going to agree to this. Like, you can come
Oh
over, you
yeah.
can come, we'll sit in the living room and we can do the thing, but she's never going to do this. And, and so they're counting on you to be able to do this with them, right? They're
Yeah.
counting on you to be able to convince mom or dad to take this next step because, they're exhausted. Maybe they're doing all the caregiving and they have a
Yeah.
full-time job and they have children and they're exhausted.
Yeah.
That's definitely a big scenario, that one that I see over and over and over
It's
again.
super common, right? And
Mhm.
we lived it. So my family does have a very elderly I have a grandfather who's 95, and my parents now are retired, but he's been actually in great health. He's just old, right? He's elderly.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
and his wife and partner, my grandma, passed away a few years ago, so he's been more alone, right? And before they would kind of take care of each other, but they're old Italians, very, very stubborn, straight
Mhm.
from Italy, right? Barely speak any
Mhm.
English. And we had that conversation where we said we think it might make sense if you maybe worked or lived in assisted living. Did not go over well at all. Wanted to stay home in the house he's lived in for his 50 years, right?
Right.
So
All the memories
uh,
are there. Everything is there.
exactly.
Mhm.
So what ended up happening was my dad and his brothers and sisters ended up being the caregivers, and every day somebody would go there. But the challenge was some of them still worked.
Mhm.
So some were putting in more effort, some were putting in less effort, but it wasn't necessarily the effort, it was just the time because everyone also had families too, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's when we had the idea. This is before, and my mom obviously championed this because she had an agency at the time, and she's like, let's get him set up with a home care person who can go in and alleviate some of the pressure of what's
Mhm.
been on you guys. And they got set up, and it was a beautiful system because it was clear communication. Everyone had that sense of relief, but we also felt really confident that our loved one was receiving awesome care. And I
Mhm.
think that was something that really matters in the grand scheme of things, because when you get tired, you get burnt out. If you're a family caregiver or taking care of your own loved one, the quality of the care, there's resentment that kind of builds, right? That's
Sure.
a topic
Sure.
we've seen, and
Mhm.
it's
It
it's
takes
not
over the relationship
a
dynamic, which
hundred
is
percent,
sad.
and it's
Yeah.
not intentional. It
No,
just
it's not, for
everything,
sure.
life
Mhm.
happens, right?
Yep.
We have so many stresses nowadays in our life, cost of living, this and that. Everything is just
Mhm.
wild, it seems, and all the things you see on the news can't keep
Yeah.
up. Right. So
Yep.
it's like every single factor, you have to think about these things because that's really at our core why home care is so important. Let us take on the stress that you allows you to either A, as an agency, focus on growth, or B, as a person with a loved one, focus on your life to make sure you're happy, your loved ones are happy, and you can give that person the support they need from you, right?
Right, right.
So,
Your relationship as it was can continue
yeah,
because being the caregiver, it really zaps that out of the relationship. It really takes that relationship you had before changes, and it's not usually in a good way. So
no.
yeah, getting a
And
caregiver then allows them to continue
yeah,
that relationship too.
yeah, and it largely stems because at the end of the day, I'm not trained as a caregiver, or my
Sure.
parents weren't
Mhm.
trained as caregivers. So there's a lot of empathy. There's a lot of interpersonal skills that are required, and you learn as what comes with being a professional caregiver, person-centered care, all those kinds of topics, right? Being a professional caregiver in general. self-care, right? That's a big topic. And a lot of
Right,
people
right.
that aren't in the care space don't know these things or know how to implement them, right?
Mhm.
And set those boundaries. And it's like, it's the whole idea of you give an inch, you take a mile. If we don't push back on our loved ones, we're a lot less likely to do. We just do everything,
Exactly.
it just compounds and then you resent them, right?
And you're
So
exhausted.
you're
Yeah. And I think
exhausted.
it's
Yeah.
much harder to care for someone you're emotionally connected with
Yeah.
than for a caregiver. They come in, they care about their clients. I'm not saying they don't care, but they're not emotionally connected the way a family member is.
It's
So,
different.
because I've
Yeah.
had so many adult children, my mom's going to be so hard. No one's going to want to do this with her. They follow me out of the house to tell me, they give me the tea, right? She's going to
Yeah.
be so difficult. She's going to be such a terrible client. I'm so sorry. And I think she won't be for the caregiver. That's the relationship you have. And
You
that's you
have. Yeah.
picturing what that would look like for you. This caregiver is going to come in. She's not emotionally connected. They have no history with each other. And usually it goes just fine,
Yeah.
and the adult children are shocked that it's going
Yeah,
fine.
we had
Yeah.
that same concern because again, my grandfather, very stu lovely man, very stubborn, right? Very set in his ways. And we're like, oh, this is gonna be kind of tough. Like, is he really gonna resonate or relate to this person? Is he gonna let them in and open up to them? Is he gonna tell them the truth, right? It was
Hmm.
such a beautiful relationship because they're initially it was a bit tough, but once they got that trust built, right? Oh my
Hmm.
goodness, it was like night and day. And
Yeah.
the happiness that he felt from somebody that was not his family taking care of him, it matters because it shows them that yes, everyone outside of your family, people still care about you, even though you're an elder, right? And there's always the topic of caring for elders and the things that happen, right? And it shows them that people still care about them too.
Yeah. That's an important piece too, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, hey, we're kind of rocking through this, and let's get to the next one because it kind of
Okay.
segues nicely. Now, how do we track key metrics to measure the effectiveness of sales and marketing efforts for home care services?
Yeah, I've in the past, and what we teach too is to set goals and KPIs for your sales team. Actually, everyone in your office. I kind of look at it like your business. Say it's a dark room, and there are 15 things that you want to be different by the end of this year. The next year that's coming up, you want 15 things to change. You really have to shine a light on those 15 things in that dark room. You have to shine a light on them, and you have to be tracking it throughout the year, not quarterly, not at the end of the year, because by the time the quarter's over, whatever those 15 things were, if they didn't change, it's too late to go back and fix that.
Yeah, definitely.
So weekly looking at, set goals for the year, break them down into quarterly goals, and then break them down into weekly goals and set KPIs around that. So a KPI is a key performance indicator. It's the indicator of progress towards the intended result, the goal.
Hmm.
So I always had goals for my marketing people, 40 to 50 stops a week. Out of those 40 to 50, 15 to 20 are face-to-face. And out of that, you get 5 to 7 referrals typically.
Yeah,
Your booking ratio for service inquiries should be at 70%, signing ratio 90%. And out of that, if all of that is going well, you'll have 3 to 4 signed jobs from your referral sources every week. That should be something you're doing in every part of your business. Maybe you
yeah,
want to have 80 caregivers on the payroll by the end of the year. I know we can have 300 caregivers, but how many are actually working, right? Like how many are actually on payroll? So if you want to get to 80, you need to look at it every week. If it's not increasing, if your sales, if you're not hitting your signed jobs or your revenue goals every single week, look at it every week. And if you didn't hit it this week, why? What can I do right now so that next week I hit that goal so that I don't get to the end of the quarter and I'm way behind?
yeah.
You have to be watching all of it every single week. So that's what I've done in the past.
Yeah, I
It's
think it's
really
important.
well.
It's having the goals, but also understanding how you work towards them. And I think
Yes.
we can always
Mhm.
set KPIs. We can say this is our target, this is how you measure it, but it's also being consistent with how you track them, right? And
Yes,
I
for
think
sure.
you got to compartmentalize or break them down. You can like I love the example you mentioned of 80 caregivers on payroll, right? It's like if that's our goal this year, well, what does that mean from a scheduling perspective? Well, how many clients do we need? How do we get more clients? How do we grow the business? And it's, I think, just breaking it down into segments too, right? You want to have yearly goals, quarterly goals, monthly goals, weekly goals. And if your weekly goals are being met, gives you more of a chance at your monthly goals. If your monthly goals are
Exactly.
being met, well, your quarterly goals should
Mhm.
follow. Your quarterly goals are being met, well, your annual goals should follow suit. So you have to break it down into stages. The
Mhm.
biggest issue or challenges I've seen, because I used to be a sales leader as well, training teams and that kind of thing. And it was when people would look and say, this year I got to hit X number. But then the work that leads up to that was way too like long-term play, right? They didn't look at the micro and say, okay, I need to
Exactly.
work on 100 phone calls a day. I want to book 5 meetings. I want to do X, Y, and Z. But it was like, okay, when I hit my goal, I'm going to close 4 deals that are this size. But they have no way to get there, right?
Right.
Or they
Right.
don't have a plan, I
Mhm.
should say, to get there.
It's like I need to be in Disneyland tomorrow, but you don't have a map. There's no map,
Or
no
or you didn't book your
GPS.
flight, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. You don't know how, you don't have the steps to get to that place. So,
Yeah.
and that's really important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such and it sounds really easy when you spell it out on paper, but it's a really tough thing because there's a lot of different like mental factors too, like being discouraged when somebody says no, or how to overcome that objection, or
Hmm.
other things, right? So that's a different part of the KPI, right? How many conversations are you having, which is the conversion, right? How many conversations convert to a face-to-face, convert to a contract, convert to a signed deal or a signed agreement? And I think if you really break those numbers down, you can then understand, is it my messaging that's not working? Is it my
Hmm.
approach? Is there something else I'm doing that's, setting people or, rubbing them the wrong way or something, whatever it looks like. So a lot of data, more data is always good, but there's also the idea of data overload, but it's knowing what data matters most in the context
Exactly.
of your business too. Because you could
Hmm.
look at a million different things, but which ones really move the needle? Once you can figure those out, hone in on them, that's really your recipe to success in sales.
Hmm. Yep, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, amazing. Well, the last question here for you today, Dawn, really reflects around your experience and how you've seen success. And the question itself is, can you share any case studies or examples, I should say, of how salespeople have successfully improved their performance and closed deals in the home care market under your guidance?
Sure. So there's two case studies that came to mind when I kind of read this question. One is about a marketer who was doing the business development in the field and doing all the things, but it wasn't turning into referrals. And the other one is someone who's going out to the homes to sign jobs and they aren't actually signing. So
Hmm.
those were two separate case studies. So as the business development person, marketer out in the field, you have to remember that your job is it's really important for the health of the business. I mean, sales, it all comes down to that. You're the
Yeah,
rainmaker, right? You're the one
yeah,
bringing in the clients, bringing in the referrals. And so, there's different ways to go about getting those referrals coming in. And I've seen marketers volunteer at skilled nursing facilities, volunteer at assisted living, do all these, just put their whole heart and soul into everything, but it's not turning into referrals. And at the end of the day, the home care business is a business. It needs to be profitable. It needs to be growing. It needs to have revenue. And so spending your time doing that may pay off, but if it's not, then you have to figure out why and not be
yeah,
spending your time volunteering. And they love you there too. That's the other thing. They can absolutely love you and be excited you walked in the building, but it's not turning into a referral, then it's not really maybe wasting your time. If you want to volunteer out of the goodness of your heart, that's wonderful. But if you're doing it
hmm,
for the business, it needs to grow. So
yeah,
we teach like 5 impressions to get a referral, right? And so there's 5 of them. This person is having a problem with the last impression, which is directing the referral,
mm,
asking for the business. And that can be scary
yeah,
for salespeople, but it's not as scary in home care because the places you're going, they need home care. This
yeah,
person's discharging with a hip replacement. They need home care. That social worker is going to refer somebody. You're just taking the referral and directing it to yourself.
yeah,
And so that's the part that's missing with the person who's giving 100%, making all the stops, volunteering, doing all the things they're supposed to do. They're not directing that referral. And it's
yeah,
not hard to do. You just have to direct the conversation. How is your census is a great way to start it. The parking lot was so full, I had to park down the street. You must be full, or there are a lot
wow,
of people visiting. And then they
right,
say, yes, we're very full right now. Is there anyone discharging this week in need of our services? I mean, you can just, you have to control the conversation
yeah.
and direct those referrals. So you're nice and you're wonderful and everything's going great. They trust you. But if you're not getting referrals, this might be the impression that you're missing.
Yeah. Well, you said two key points there, Dawn, and it was the one you just mentioned. It was asking questions or being observant, right? If you pull up
Mhm.
to a facility or a SNF and you're like, hey, this parking lot's full. There's nowhere to park. In fact, I had to park down the block. I'm going to use that and ask a question around that and say, hey, when you speak to the facility manager, whomever, right, is doing managing the discharge, you make that comment. Say, hey, wow, you're really packed out here. You must be really full. Yeah, we're jammed or whatever the response is. Interesting. So does that mean you have any, clients going home this week or in the next couple of weeks that are going to need some home care like transition services? Boom. If they say yeah, you got your in. You
Right,
perfectly
right.
set it up to then make your pitch or at
Mhm.
least ease into it. The other thing that you said that resonates with me, and honestly, it was something that I wouldn't say struggled with, but I had a hard time really honing in on in my early sales career. I've been in sales for 10, 12 years now, actually. It was asking for the sale. You do everything leading up to it. You know they like you. You know they're going to be your client, but then it stalls and they don't sign or the contract gets sent out or whatever. But you didn't actually say, "Are you ready to buy? Are you going to sign? When would you like to start?" A question
Mhm.
that I ask, and I do this with home care agencies, not just relevant to our space. In an ideal world, when are you ideally using the program? What's your, ideal start date? When would you love
Mhm.
to be using the program in practice? And they might say tomorrow. And I say, okay, well, what's a realistic date? Maybe it's the 1st of July. Okay, well, the 1st of July is coming up really quick. Typically, we expect a 3 to 4 week onboarding time frame. I would say if that's your ideal target date, we should probably get moving on the agreement of the paperwork this week. Does that sound fair to you? Yeah, that makes sense. We want to be live, so we'll get it done. Okay, you've just found out what means the most to them, and you've used that to get the sale. You've
Mhm.
indirectly asked for it, but now you're on the right track. And I think that's a beautiful practice I use every week, every day almost, and it works more than it doesn't, right? Because if they want your business, if they want to work with you, they will, as long as you're asking and guiding them down that path to
Mhm.
success.
Yep, and sometimes some need more direct like direction than others too.
Yeah.
For the
Hmm.
referral sort, oh, you're here again. It's so good to see you. And they're so happy to see you. And it's like, do they think I'm just coming to hang out? Why aren't they that you just have to be more direct with some of them. But the parking lot is great. I mean, my marketers that I had at my last home care agency, they're like, it's so slow, it's so slow. And I'm like, drive around and look at the parking lots. That'll
Yeah.
tell you all you need to know. You really can tell a lot by the park, especially if you're going, you have to go back every 8 to 10 days. If you're honestly doing that you're gonna notice it's
Yeah.
empty, it's full. You're gonna notice that it's different if it
Yeah.
changes. So
And what's important about that is the idea that you have to be out there in the field. I've talked to so many home care agencies, franchises, even that manage multiple locations. I'm working with one right now, and he said our top performing locations, those location managers are out in the field all day. They are
mhm,
driving around in their cars, they're getting new business, they're getting inquiries, getting referrals. So I think really the recipe for success in a lot of ways is just getting out there, familiarizing yourself with your territory, with your
mhm,
industry, with the facilities you possibly can work or contract with, and being hyper curious. Maybe you show up one day, they have no time to talk to you. That's okay. Maybe we'll go back the next day, or we'll just use that to gather some information so we can next time we speak to them and have 5 minutes of their time, it's a worthwhile conversation, right?
right.
And
Yep.
I think those things are really some easy wins you can do. It's more like effort based, but those are some easy wins you can do and you can control that will ultimately set you up to be more successful, hopefully.
And I think too, I mean, we're a digital marketing company, right? We do websites and SEO and all of those things. We
Hmm.
also do the home care sales training, but when we talk to potential clients about digital marketing, we have a slide that says 70% of your private pay is going to come from your feet on the ground efforts.
Yep.
I don't digital marketing companies don't tell people that because they need a website and they need all that and they
Yeah.
do, they do need those things, but it's so important that you're out in the field and get away from being behind your desk. In this industry, you have to absolutely have a field
Absolutely got
presence.
to get boots on the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so critical.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that was all the questions, Don, I had for you
Okay.
today. So that was fun. I thought
Yes,
hopefully,
I
the
really enjoyed
audience,
this.
yeah, hopefully the audience learned something new. Sales is such a critical component to all businesses of all shapes and sizes, but in home care, it's a very challenging thing to navigate. And I think you've explained your philosophy beautifully, and hopefully, the audience learned something new today. So
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much, Mike, for
yeah, thank
me.
you, Dawn, obviously for sparing your time and sharing the insights. And as I mentioned, I'm sure the audience did find these useful. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. And until next episode, this is Mike signing off. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.